All right, hey everybody, here Patrick, Prime Ag, jumping back in another webinar. We've had a lot of questions, um, concerns, kind of on this basis topic in here, especially with the futures market being, so high in the last few weeks, kind of, exploding off here. But basis hasn't really caught up, or you've even gotten into the point where you've seen basis widen out from where it was previously. So we just kind of want to paint a picture of how this supply chain all works and what you're kind of looking at. As everybody knows, you essentially have the three components here. You have your farmer, your local elevator, and then your end user, which is either exports, ethanol, or feed for your three major grains. And as you move through the chain, obviously you kind of have basis in here, which everybody needs in order to account for storage, transportation, etc. As you move through, the supply chain. And obviously, as you'll notice, your local elevator, is in the middle. They kind of got both hands in this thing. They're buying from the farmer, simultaneously selling onto the export market. And as you can see here, in the current situation, what happened is basically working backwards in the supply chain. Your bins or your needs down at the end user section were full. And so it's hard for the elevator to take on that risk of buying from the farmer if, on their other hand, they have no buyer or seller, if you will, for the grain to move to. So the other thing that happened in here is you got to remember we have what's a physical market, and we obviously have the paper market, the futures contracts, okay? And so we had this huge run up in wheat futures, corn futures, and a lot of that is just due to fear, to greed, news, speculators, funds, whatever you want to call it, can all jump in and just trade the paper. They really have no use for the physical, if you will. And so prices can continue to skyrocket because you're essentially just, you're trading a piece of paper with a few clicks in most instances, okay? And so you can almost argue that prices might have been artificially high. And when you consider looking over on the cash market side of things, that's exactly what your elevators were telling you, was that kind of that first wave of selling. As the markets went up, they were able to fill their bins and meet their needs. And downstream, where the export market is, or what have you, the feed user, the livestock producer, their needs are met. There's no other place for this grain to go. So the cash market is kind of telling you the real story in here, and that despite futures being up $1, the cash market and the actual usage and needs for the physical bushels is really only worth about $10 or $9.50 or whatever your basis is. So again, on the one hand, you have your paper trading, your futures markets, outside money, what have you, pumping prices. In the meantime, the people that are actually using the product, or the markets that are actually needing or using the product, are saying, hey, pump the brakes, we're full, we can't grind anymore, we don't have any usage for this, etc. And so in the middle, remember, your elevator has to balance that out. They have to manage that risk. And so as we go here on to the next slide, what we're going to show is obviously the 2022 Chicago wheat futures. And currently, you have that inverted market where the May contract is at 12. And if you go all the way down to D's, you're looking at 960. It's a pretty good drop. And so you have to, again, just ask, how are you going to manage the bushels? Or excuse me, how do you manage both sides of risk? As we talk, the typical market, you have carry, meaning, the July price is usually higher than the May, the SEP is higher than the July, and so on. Your elevator at that point can make money. They make money by storing. They roll ahead and they sell into the carry of the market. And that's how they, create their margins and make their money. In the current market environment, with the spreads inverted, there obviously is no carry, and so the elevators really need to move this grain straight through from left hand to right, if you will, and make sure that for every bushel they buy from the farmer, they have a seller, somebody they can sell it to on the other side. And so right now, with the bins full, there is zero incentive for them to take more grain because the carry is not there for them to store. In fact, as you can see, they're losing money by holding these bushels. And so what they need to be able to do is push it along to the end user as quickly as possible. And when they just simply don't have that demand, they have to widen basis out to discourage farmers from trying to sell their bushels despite what the futures market is telling you. And we've seen that in markets in the other way, where the futures, we've had guys call in, or we've been in a circumstance And you got to wonder why the futures market isn't quite as high. And we'll say, well, maybe the cash market will do the work, and that's where you get, a much tighter basis. Is it's telling you that the demand really is there for the physical bushels, but maybe the paper demand, the trading demand for these contracts isn't quite there. So just to kind of wrap this thing up, the biggest thing you always have to do is ask yourself, where's the risk? We have to remember the farmer always has risk, the elevator has risk, your end user also, has some risk. So that's kind of the key question, where is the risk at? Who is the buyer? That's more for the elevator. Who are they going to sell to? Who's buying from them? Is the export market, are we shipping bushels? Do livestock producers need the feed? Did they cover their needs ahead of time? Those are the kinds of things you have to look at. Also have to consider, remember, why basis exists is the cost to transport, to store, what have you. Right now, there is no storage. Transportation is goofy with shortages between truckers and shipping and war and what have you. And so in order to manage that risk and try to effectively spread it out, basis has to widen when you just don't know what's going to happen between day one of buying this 5,000 bushels and day 3 of trying to get it sold off to the next person. You also have to keep in mind the paper market versus the physical market. Again, you could almost argue that wheat traded like GameStop or AMC. Okay, it became a function simply for pure speculation, whether it's your neighbor or the guy at the coffee shop, or the guy in suburbia that wanted to get in the wheat to try and hedge inflation or what have you. The paper market ran artificially high compared to what the physical market was actually demanding. So again, hopefully this kind of paints the picture. We have to remember that there's a whole chain of events that goes through. Ultimately, when you start at the end of the line where your end user is, their needs are met, there is no more demand currently. And so as you work your way backwards, the elevator has to continue to offset that risk until it ends up coming back to the farmer. And the farmer obviously has to offset their own risk. And so that's why it's important to make sure you hedge your grain, know what your input costs are, etc., because you certainly cannot control the chain of events as they work down the line. We hope we found this video helpful. You guys please like and subscribe if you did. If you have questions, feel free to call us, visit our website. We're always here to help. We're happy to answer these questions, and we hope to bring you guys another good webinar here next week. Thanks.